The flickering orange glow of torches cast dancing shadows across weathered faces as the mob gathered outside the Morrison house. Television cameras captured the scene from behind police barriers, their harsh lights illuminating signs that read, "Demon Child Out," and "Protect Our Children." Sarah Morrison clutched her 8-year-old son Danny closer to her chest as angry voices rose from the street below. The boy's cerebral palsy made his limbs shake uncontrollably. But tonight the tremors seemed worse, as if his body understood the hatred pressing against their windows like a living thing. "We have to leave. Michael," Sarah whispered to her husband, who stood frozen at the window, his knuckles white against the glass. "They're not going to stop." The sound of breaking glass echoed from somewhere in the neighborhood. Another family like theirs. Probably. Another target of the madness that had consumed Millbrook in just 3 weeks. Danny looked up at his mother with eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. "Did I really hurt people? Mommy?" His words came slowly, carefully formed despite the speech impediment that made some townspeople avoid looking at him directly. Sarah's heart broke all over again as she smoothed his dark hair, damp with sweat from fever and fear. "No, baby. You could never hurt anyone. Some people just don't understand how special you are." But even as she said it, Sarah wondered if love would be enough to protect him from what they'd unleashed by simply existing in this place they'd hoped to call home. 3 months earlier, the Morrison family had driven their packed U-Haul through Millbrook's tree-lined Main Street with genuine hope blooming in their chests. The small Connecticut town seemed perfect affordable housing, good schools, and the kind of close-knit community where neighbors still brought casseroles to new families. Michael had landed a job at the local insurance agency, while Sarah planned to work part-time at the library once Danny settled into his new school routine. Danny had been excited about starting 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary. Despite his physical limitations, he possessed a brilliant mind that devoured books about dinosaurs, space exploration, and ancient civilizations. His teachers at their previous school had marveled at his ability to remember complex details and connect seemingly unrelated facts into fascinating theories that often proved surprisingly accurate. The first few weeks went smoothly. Danny made friends with Emma, a quiet girl who shared his love of reading, and Mrs. Henderson, his teacher, quickly recognized his intellectual gifts. The physical therapy sessions at the local clinic were going well, and for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe they'd found their place in the world. Then, Karen Blackwood noticed them. Karen had lived in Millbrook her entire 52 years, watching the town change from a farming community to a bedroom suburb with the suspicious eye of someone who believed every change brought hidden dangers. She ran a blog called Truth Seekers of New England that attracted a small but devoted following of conspiracy theorists who shared her conviction that sinister forces were constantly working to undermine small-town American values. She first saw Danny at the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon in September. The boy was reaching for a box of cereal from a lower shelf, his movements jerky but determined. When he succeeded in grabbing the box, he smiled with pure joy at his accomplishment. Karen watched from the next aisle, her pale eyes narrowing as she observed his unusual gait and the way other shoppers seemed to give him extra space. That night, she called her sister Margaret in Vermont. "There's something off about that new family," she said, pacing around her cluttered living room filled with stacks of printed internet articles and handwritten notes. "The boy has this presence. Animals won't go near him." Margaret, who had been listening to Karen's theories for decades, made appropriate murmuring sounds. "What do you mean? Presence?" "I watched Mrs. Patterson's cat run away when he walked by. And did you notice how many accidents we've had since they moved here? Johnson's barn fire. That 3-car pileup on Route 7, old Mr. Chen's heart attack." Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. I think that child is cursed. Margaret. Or worse. The seed of an idea began growing in Karen's mind, fed by her deep-rooted need to be the one who saw threats others missed. She started documenting every minor mishap that occurred in Millbrook, creating a timeline that centered around the Morrison family's arrival. A fender bender here, a power outage there, a case of food poisoning at the diner, all became evidence in her growing conspiracy theory. On the morning of October 15th, old Mrs. Chen found her husband collapsed in their garden. The 83-year-old had suffered a mild stroke while tending to his prized tomatoes. As the ambulance pulled away from their house on Maple Street, Karen noticed Danny Morrison walking to school on the same sidewalk where Mr. Chen had been working just hours earlier. That afternoon, Karen called 911. "I need to report suspicious activity involving potential harm to our community," she told dispatcher Jenny Rodriguez, her voice trembling with manufactured urgency. "There's a family on Elm Street, the Morrisons. Their disabled son is causing accidents and illness wherever he goes. People are getting hurt, and it's escalating." Jenny had known Karen since high school and was familiar with her tendency toward dramatic interpretations of everyday events. "Karen, what exactly are you alleging? Has this child committed a crime?" "It's not about crime, it's about protection. That boy brings misfortune. Bad luck follows him like a shadow. Mr. Chen's stroke, the Johnson barn fire, all the accidents since they arrived. The pattern is obvious, if you're willing to see it." Karen's voice rose with conviction. "I'm not the only one who's noticed. People are scared to say anything because of political correctness. But children are at risk. Ma'am, I can't file a report based on coincidental events. If you have evidence of actual wrongdoing." "Evidence. The evidence is all around us. Open your eyes before someone dies." Karen slammed down the phone, fury and righteousness burning in her chest. If the authorities wouldn't listen, she'd have to take matters into her own hands. Within hours, Karen's blog post titled, "The Cursed Child Among Us, A Mother's Warning," went live. She detailed every accident and illness that had occurred since August, weaving them into a narrative of supernatural malevolence centered on Danny Morrison. She included photos she'd secretly taken of the boy walking to school, his awkward gait highlighted in red circles with arrows pointing to his unnatural posture and disturbing aura. The post spread beyond her usual readership. Someone shared it on Facebook with the caption, "This is happening in our town right now." Another person posted screenshots to a local parent group with warnings about dangerous influences in the school system. By evening, the story had reached 3 different conspiracy theory forums, where Karen was hailed as a brave truth-teller, exposing hidden dangers. Sarah Morrison first learned about the accusations when Emma's mother, Patricia, called that night. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you, but have you seen what's being said online about Danny?" Patricia's voice carried a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Some woman is claiming he's cursed, or possessed, or something equally ridiculous." "What are you talking about?" Sarah's stomach clenched as she opened her laptop and searched for their family name. The first result made her blood run cold. Karen's blog post appeared with their address clearly listed and photos of their house labeled as Ground Zero of Supernatural Activity. Michael read over her shoulder, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. "This is insane. She's basically painting a target on our backs." He reached for his phone. "I'm calling the police." But when Officer Martinez arrived an hour later, he seemed more concerned about managing potential conflict than addressing the accusations themselves. "Look, I understand you're upset, but she hasn't technically threatened you. Freedom of speech protects even opinions we disagree with." He glanced around their modest living room, taking in Danny's adaptive toys and medical equipment. "My advice: keep your heads down. Let this blow over. These internet things usually die out on their own. She posted our address. Sarah protested. She's encouraging people to see my son as dangerous. How is that not threatening? Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably. Unless someone makes specific threats or commits actual harassment, there's not much we can do. Document everything, though. If this escalates, we'll need evidence. The escalation began the next morning. Danny's regular bus driver, Mrs. Foster, called in sick and was replaced by a substitute who had read Karen's blog post. When Danny climbed aboard, using the special lift for his wheelchair, the driver's hands visibly shook on the steering wheel. "Maybe you should sit in the back today, son," the substitute muttered, avoiding eye contact. Away from the other kids, Emma immediately spoke up. "That's not fair. Danny always sits with me." But her protest was drowned out by whispers from other students who had heard their parents discussing the cursed boy at dinner tables throughout Millbrook. At school, Mrs. Henderson found herself facing pressure from both the principal and several concerned parents. 3 families had called demanding their children be moved to different classrooms, citing safety concerns they couldn't quite articulate. The principal, Mr. Walsh, was a decent man caught between protecting his students and managing community pressure. "I know this is difficult," he told Mrs. Henderson during their emergency meeting. "But we need to consider all our families. Maybe we could arrange some modified scheduling for Danny until things calm down." Mrs. Henderson, a 30-year veteran of education, looked at him with undisguised disappointment. "You want me to segregate an 8-year-old because some conspiracy theorist blogger has stirred up hysteria? Danny Morrison is one of the brightest students I've ever taught. If we give in to this madness, what message are we sending to our children?" Meanwhile, Karen was experiencing the intoxicating rush of viral attention. Her blog traffic had increased tenfold, with supportive comments flooding in from across the country. People shared their own stories of supernatural encounters and praised her courage for speaking truth to power. She began planning a follow-up post with new evidence she was carefully collecting. That evidence consisted of increasingly creative interpretations of normal events. When a water main burst on the other side of town, Karen connected it to Danny's presence at the library that afternoon. A minor outbreak of stomach flu among first graders became a supernatural plague spreading from his classroom. She even claimed that unusually cold October weather was a sign of dark forces growing stronger. The harassment escalated throughout the week. Someone spray-painted "Demon Child" on the Morrison's mailbox. Their car tires were slashed while parked at the grocery store. Anonymous phone calls began coming at all hours, with distorted voices warning them to leave town before something terrible happens. Sarah barely slept, jumping at every sound outside their windows. Michael took time off work to stay home and protect his family, but his boss made it clear that his absence wasn't appreciated. "Look, I don't want to get involved in whatever's going on, Mr. Peterson told him over the phone. "But this is affecting office morale. Maybe you need to consider what's best for everyone." The breaking point came during Danny's physical therapy session at Millbrook Medical Center. Dr. Amanda Ross had been working with Danny for 6 weeks and had seen remarkable improvement in his motor skills. She was adjusting his leg braces when Karen Blackwood burst into the waiting room with 2 other women, all clutching printed copies of blog posts and forum discussions. "You need to stop treating that child immediately," Karen announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He's dangerous. People get sick after being near him. You're putting your other patients at risk." Dr. Ross emerged from the therapy room with professional composure, but her eyes flashed with anger. "Ma'am, you need to leave. This is a medical facility, and you're disrupting patient care." "I'm protecting this community." Karen's voice rose to near shouting. That boy has caused every major accident and illness in this town since August. The evidence is overwhelming, and you medical professionals are too blinded by political correctness to see it. Yi, one of Karen's companions, a nervous-looking woman named Beth, began reading from her phone. 3 cases of food poisoning at restaurants he's visited. 2 car accidents on his walking route to school. Mrs. Chen's stroke happened the same morning he walked past their house. Danny, who had been listening from the therapy room, began crying. Not the typical tears of a frustrated child, but the deep, heartbroken sobs of someone who understands they're being blamed for pain they never caused. Sarah wrapped her arms around him, whispering reassurances she no longer believed herself. "Look what you're doing to him." Sarah's voice cracked as she faced Karen directly for the first time. "He's 8 years old. He has cerebral palsy, not supernatural powers. You're terrorizing a disabled child based on coincidences and your own paranoid delusions." Karen's eyes gleamed with the fervor of someone absolutely convinced of their righteousness. Disabled or cursed. The timing of every accident, every illness, every tragedy in this town points directly to your son. The pattern doesn't lie, even if you refuse to see it. Security arrived to escort Karen and her followers from the building, but the damage was done. Other families in the waiting room had heard everything. Some looked sympathetic, others uncertain, and a few nodded in agreement with Karen's accusations. Dr. Ross later admitted to Sarah that she'd received pressure from the hospital administration to consider alternative arrangements for Danny's care. That evening, the first protesters appeared outside the Morrison house. Only 5 people at first, holding handmade signs and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. But Karen's latest blog post, titled "Medical Establishment Ignores Cursed Child Danger," had gone viral on social media platforms, attracting attention from far beyond Millbrook's borders. By the weekend, the crowd had grown to nearly 50 people. Some were local residents caught up in the hysteria, but others had driven from neighboring towns after seeing the story shared in various online communities. They brought camping chairs and thermoses of coffee, settling in for what they called a protective vigil to pressure the Morrison family into leaving. The police presence increased, but officers seemed focused on managing the protesters rather than protecting the family. Captain Hayes told reporters that citizens have the right to peaceful assembly, and that the department was monitoring the situation closely to ensure everyone's safety. Inside their house, the Morrisons felt increasingly isolated and desperate. Their internet connection had been cut after someone discovered their service provider's information online. Their phone rang constantly with threatening calls until they finally unplugged it. Danny stopped eating, his small body growing thinner as the stress took its toll on his already fragile health. "We have to leave," Michael finally said on Sunday night, as they huddled together in Danny's room, the safest space since it faced the backyard away from the protesters. "This isn't going to get better. It's only getting worse." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "But where can we go? This story is everywhere now. What if it follows us?" Danny looked up at his parents with eyes that held a wisdom no child should possess. "Maybe they're right about me. Mommy, maybe I do hurt people." "No, baby. Never say that. You are the most beautiful, loving person in the world. These people are wrong, and someday everyone will know it." But Sarah's voice lacked conviction. Worn down by weeks of relentless hostility and her own growing doubt about their ability to survive the storm. As if summoned by their desperation, the mob's energy shifted that night. Someone had brought torches, actual flaming torches that cast flickering shadows across the house's windows. The chanting grew louder and more organized. "Demon child out! Protect our town!" Then came the sound of breaking glass from somewhere nearby. The Hendersons' house, 2 blocks away, where Danny's teacher lived. Someone had thrown a brick through their front window with a note attached, "Stop protecting the cursed child, or face the consequences." The attack on Mrs. Henderson's home marked a turning point that Karen hadn't anticipated. While she reveled in the attention her crusade was receiving, she hadn't considered that violence might spiral beyond her control. When she arrived at the scene and saw the shattered glass and threatening note, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But the momentum was too strong to stop now. Her followers looked to her for guidance, their faces flushed with righteous anger and the intoxicating power of mob mentality. Karen made a split-second decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "This is what happens when evil is protected by misguided liberals," she announced to the crowd, her voice carrying clearly in the cold October air. "They care more about political correctness than protecting innocent children. Well, we care more about our families than their feelings." The crowd roared its approval, energized by Karen's words and the growing sense that they were warriors in a righteous battle. Someone shouted that they should march on the Morrison house immediately. Others suggested making them understand that they weren't welcome in Millbrook. What Karen didn't know was that Emma's mother, Patricia, had been recording everything on her phone from her car across the street. As a journalist who had covered hate crimes for the Hartford Courant, she recognized the dangerous escalation she was witnessing. While the crowd surged toward Elm Street with their torches and fury, Patricia was already uploading video clips to news outlets and civil rights organizations. The Morrison family barely escaped. Michael had been monitoring police scanner chatter on his phone and heard reports of the crowd moving toward their house. With only minutes to spare, they grabbed essential medications for Danny and fled through their back door, leaving behind almost everything they owned. They spent that night in a motel 40 miles away, watching news coverage of their own persecution on cable television. The images were surreal and terrifying. Hundreds of people gathered outside their empty house, some holding signs declaring "Evil Child Expelled" and "Millbrook Protected." Others giving interviews about their relief that the supernatural threat had been eliminated. Karen stood prominently in front of the cameras, basking in her moment of victory. "Today, our community chose to protect innocent families over dangerous political correctness," she declared to Channel 8 News. "That cursed child brought nothing but misfortune and tragedy to our town. Now that he's gone, we can heal and rebuild." But even as Karen celebrated, larger forces were already mobilizing against her. Patricia's footage had reached the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. The images of torch-carrying crowds targeting a disabled child created immediate national outrage and triggered federal hate crime investigations. The turning point came from an unexpected source. FBI Special Agent Maria Santos had been monitoring online extremist groups when Karen's blog posts appeared in several hate crime databases. The sophisticated pattern of escalating rhetoric, the coordinated harassment campaign, and the eventual mob violence fit established profiles of domestic terrorism targeting vulnerable communities. Agent Santos began a deeper investigation into Karen's online activities and discovered something that made her blood run cold. Karen's phone records showed dozens of calls to various Millbrook residents in the weeks leading up to the harassment campaign. More damning were the anonymous tip lines she had called with false reports designed to build her evidence against the Morrison family. The breakthrough came when investigators analyzed Karen's computer and found evidence that she had been systematically fabricating the supernatural claims. She had created multiple fake social media accounts to post corroborating testimonies from alleged witnesses. She had used photo editing software to create proof of Danny's supposed aura of misfortune. Most shocking of all, she had deliberately caused several of the accidents and incidents she later blamed on the boy. Security camera footage from Johnson's farm revealed Karen near the barn on the night of the fire, carrying what appeared to be an accelerant container. Cell phone tower data placed her at the intersection where the three-car accident occurred, just minutes before the crash that she had reported as supernatural intervention. Most damaging of all, medical records showed that she had been purchasing rat poison and other toxins that could have caused the food poisoning outbreaks she attributed to Danny's presence. The investigation revealed a pattern of calculated malice that went far beyond simple prejudice or mental illness. Karen had deliberately targeted the Morrison family because she saw Danny's disability as the perfect cover for a campaign of terror that would bring her the attention and validation she craved. She had weaponized the community's fears and prejudices to create a living nightmare for an innocent child and his family. When federal agents arrested Karen at her home on November 3rd, she maintained her innocence with the same fervor she had shown while destroying the Morrison family's life. "You're making a terrible mistake," she told Agent Santos, as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I was protecting this community from a real supernatural threat. The evidence speaks for itself." "The evidence does speak for itself," Agent Santos replied calmly. "It says you're under arrest for federal hate crimes, conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism, arson, reckless endangerment, and about 15 other charges that will put you in prison for the rest of your life." As news of Karen's arrest spread through Millbrook, the community experienced a collective moment of horrified realization. The woman they had trusted as a protector had systematically manipulated and betrayed them, using their fears to destroy an innocent family while putting their own children at genuine risk through her criminal activities. The federal hate crime investigation expanded to include several of Karen's most active followers who had participated in the harassment campaign and mob violence. The Department of Justice announced that it would prosecute the case as an example of domestic terrorism targeting disabled individuals, sending a clear message that such attacks would face the full force of federal law. Meanwhile, the Morrison family remained in hiding, traumatized and uncertain about their future. Danny's health had deteriorated significantly during the ordeal, and he required intensive medical care to address both his physical symptoms and the psychological damage from being terrorized for his disability. Sarah developed severe anxiety and depression, while Michael struggled with anger and helplessness at his inability to protect his family. The breakthrough in their healing came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Wheeler, a renowned neurologist at Yale Medical School, had seen their story on the news and reached out through the FBI to offer his assistance. He specialized in treating children with cerebral palsy and had been appalled by the supernatural claims made about Danny's condition. "What happened to your family is a hate crime, pure and simple," Dr. Wheeler told them during their first meeting at his clinic. Danny's cerebral palsy is a neurological condition with a well-understood medical basis. There is absolutely nothing supernatural or dangerous about his disability, and I want to help prove that to the world. Under Dr. Wheeler's care, Danny began to recover both physically and emotionally. The specialist developed a comprehensive treatment plan that addressed not just his cerebral palsy symptoms, but also the trauma he had endured. More importantly, Dr. Wheeler began documenting Danny's remarkable intelligence and gentle nature, building a medical record that would serve as evidence in the federal hate crime trial. The trial of Karen Blackwood became a landmark case in federal hate crime prosecution. Over 8 days of testimony, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of her deliberate campaign to terrorize a disabled child and his family. The courtroom was packed with disability rights advocates, civil rights attorneys, and members of the Millbrook community who had come to face the truth about their participation in the persecution. Danny testified via video link, his clear, articulate responses dismantling any remaining notion that he was somehow dangerous or supernatural. When asked by the prosecutor why he thought people had been afraid of him, the 9-year-old boy gave an answer that brought tears to many eyes in the courtroom. I think some people are scared of things they don't understand, Danny said, his voice steady despite his speech impediment. My body moves differently because my brain works differently. But that doesn't make me bad. I just want to learn and make friends and help people, like any other kid. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Karen Blackwood was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. 7 of her followers received sentences ranging from 2 to 8 years for their roles in the harassment campaign and mob violence. More importantly, the case sparked a national conversation about disability rights and the dangers of online conspiracy theories. Congress passed the Danny Morrison Act, strengthening federal hate crime protections for disabled individuals and providing increased funding for disability awareness education in schools and communities. The town of Millbrook faced its own reckoning. A special town meeting was called where community leaders, residents, and disability advocates gathered to address what had happened and how to prevent it from ever occurring again. Mrs. Henderson, Danny's former teacher, spoke powerfully about the need for education and empathy. We allowed fear and ignorance to turn us into a mob, she told the packed auditorium. We targeted a child for being different, and in doing so, we betrayed everything we claim to value about community and protection. We cannot undo the harm we caused, but we can commit to being better. The town established the Danny Morrison Inclusion Center, a facility dedicated to providing support services for disabled individuals and their families, while offering community education about disability rights and acceptance. They also created a scholarship fund in Danny's name to support disabled students pursuing higher education. Most significantly, the community formally invited the Morrison family to return home. The invitation came in the form of a letter signed by over 800 residents, including many who had participated in or supported the harassment campaign. They acknowledged their complicity in the persecution and pledged to create a truly welcoming environment for the family's return. The decision to return was not easy for the Morrison family. The trauma they had endured left deep scars that would take years to heal. But with Dr. Wheeler's continued support and the knowledge that Karen Blackwood was imprisoned, they decided to give Millbrook another chance. Their return in the spring was met with overwhelming support from the community. Hundreds of residents lined their street with welcome signs and flowers. The house had been completely renovated by volunteers, with accessibility improvements and a beautiful garden planted by the local Girl Scout troop. Danny's old friend Emma was the first to greet him, running up with a huge smile and a new book about dinosaurs she had been saving for his return. Danny returned to Millbrook Elementary as a 5th grader, where he was welcomed by a student body that had spent 2 years learning about disability, awareness, and inclusion. His academic gifts flourished in the supportive environment, and he became something of a celebrity among younger students who admired his resilience and intelligence. At age 12, Danny was invited to speak at the National Convention of the American Civil Liberties Union about his experience and the importance of protecting disabled individuals from hate crimes. His speech, titled "Different but Not Dangerous," became a viral video that sparked important conversations in schools and communities across the country. Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. Danny told the audience of legal professionals and civil rights advocates, but being afraid doesn't give anyone the right to hurt others. My disability is part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am. I'm a son, a friend, a student, and someday, I hope to be a scientist who helps other kids like me. We all deserve the chance to be seen for who we really are, not what other people fear we might be. The Morrison family's story became a powerful example of resilience in the face of hatred and the possibility of redemption for communities willing to confront their prejudices. Sarah returned to work at the Millbrook Library, where she developed programs to promote understanding of disabilities and combat online misinformation. Michael became an advocate for hate crime victims, working with federal agencies to identify and prevent similar campaigns of terror. Karen Blackwood remained in federal prison, her blog defunct, and her followers scattered. In rare interviews from prison, she continued to maintain that she had been protecting her community, unable or unwilling to accept responsibility for the pain she had caused. Mental health professionals who evaluated her diagnosed severe narcissistic personality disorder and delusional thinking patterns that made rehabilitation unlikely. The case became required study material in law schools, police academies, and social work programs as an example of how online hate campaigns can escalate into real-world violence. The FBI developed new protocols for investigating disability-based hate crimes, recognizing the unique vulnerabilities faced by disabled individuals and their families. 5 years after the initial persecution, Millbrook had transformed into a model community for disability inclusion. The town's commitment to education and acceptance attracted families with disabled children from across the region, creating a supportive network that ensured no family would ever face the isolation and terror the Morrisons had endured. Danny Morrison, now a confident teenager with dreams of becoming a biochemist, often reflected on the terrible period when hatred had consumed his community. But rather than bitterness, he felt gratitude for the lessons learned and the positive changes that emerged from their ordeal. "I wouldn't wish what happened to us on anyone," he said during a television interview on the 5th anniversary of Karen's conviction. "But I'm grateful for what came after. Our community proved that people can change, can learn, can become better. That gives me hope for everywhere else that's still struggling with fear and misunderstanding." The legacy of the Morrison family's ordeal extended far beyond Millbrook's borders. Their story inspired federal legislation, changed law enforcement protocols, and most importantly, opened countless hearts and minds to the humanity and dignity of disabled individuals. In the end, love and truth had triumphed over hatred and lies, proving that even in our darkest moments, redemption remains possible for those willing to seek it. As Danny Morrison prepared to graduate high school as valedictorian of his class, he looked forward to studying biochemistry at Yale University with the dream of developing new treatments for neurological conditions. His acceptance speech to his graduating class captured the spirit of resilience and hope that had carried his family through their darkest days and continued to inspire their community's ongoing journey toward true inclusion and understanding. "We are all different in our own ways," Danny told his classmates, his voice strong and clear. "Some differences are visible, others are hidden, but every difference makes us who we are, and every person deserves to be valued for their unique contributions to our community." Thank you, Millbrook, for learning to see me not as something to fear, but as someone to celebrate. Together, we've proven that understanding is always stronger than hatred, and love always wins in the end.